says the true prophets in Jeremiah 23, it says the true prophets are those people that have actually stood in the counsel of God. They've heard the counsel that's going on, the conversations before the throne. They've heard the conversation in the law courts of heaven. And Jesus was one of those ones. He is the one who understood clearly. And he saw Satan arise in the law courts of heaven as the prosecutor, as the accuser. And Satan rose up before the throne of God and started saying, God, give to me Simon Peter, that I may sift him as wheat. The word give or ask, some English translations has the word demand, which is actually a better word. The word in the Greek, X-A-T-O. X-A-T-O is the word here. And the thing I love about Greek language is so powerful. There's so much meaning in one word. And when they translate a word in the Greek to a word in English, we lose a lot of meaning. This is what X-A-T-O means. It literally means to take out of your hand. It is a legal term that was used when they would demand the right to take someone to court. It's literally, this is what Satan says to God the Father. And this is out of some Greek dictionaries, how they would describe this word in English. Satan is going to God the Father and demanding, is saying, God, give me Peter out of your hand into my hands. To fully take him out of your hand. That means, I demand the right to take Peter fully out of your hand of protection. And that I'm going to take him into the law courts. And I'm going to prove to you, Peter is not worthy. We looked at the subject a few weeks ago of the books of destiny, or the scrolls of destiny. In heaven there are many books. And in heaven, and it tells us in Scripture, says this in 1 Timothy, even before the foundations of the world, it was written about me in the scroll. God's plan and purpose for your life, before the very creations of the world, God predestined a plan for you. There is a book of God's plan for your life. And in Ephesians it talks about that the works, the good works, God has prepared beforehand for you to walk in. God has a plan for you to walk in. His storyline for your life. And the Jewish people believe that these books, they speak, and they're opened up in heaven, they actually speak, and your storyline is spoken out before the throne. But there's another book, which is the book of how you actually lived your life. One day we're going to stand there and the book's going to be open, and we're going to be going, oh man, there's so much more. Oh, I missed out. Oh, God wanted me to do that. Oh, and I missed out because I was running after other things. It's like the book of how we actually live, and the book of what God's plan was for us. And Jesus walked 100% in agreement with God's plan for his life. I'm just saying that these books speak. And you can just imagine, here is Satan, the accuser, in the law courts of heaven. And when Peter's book is opened, he hears God's plan for Peter's life. And Satan fears Peter fulfilling God's plan for his life. Because Satan knows God's plan for Peter's life is going to wreak absolute destruction and chaos against the powers of darkness. He knows his kingdom is going to suffer great loss if Peter lays hold of and fulfills God's purpose for his life. There is a book in heaven with your name on it. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Even before creation, he thought of you and he said, this is how I want this person to live their life. This is the good works I've prepared. Satan knows God's plan for your life. At least he has some level of understanding. He knows how much devastation Jesus caused And ultimately, the God's plan for your life is to walk and talk and do the ministry of Jesus and become like Jesus. And He knows that if we become like Jesus, the kingdom of darkness is in big trouble. Can you just imagine just 10 Australian people rise up and be like Jesus in Australia right now? Just 10. What about 10 Koreans rise up and be like Jesus? Can you imagine the devastation the powers of darkness would receive? And Satan knows our potential. He knows an overall understanding of God's plan for our life, and he fears us fulfilling it. So what he does is, this is what he does with Peter. He is demanding the right to take Peter out of God's hand of protection into his hand so that he can test Peter, that he has a legal right to do this, to take him to court, to test him, and to prove that he is not worthy. And Satan looks at every Christian, especially those of us who start to rise up and say, I want to fulfill God's call for my life. Those people that sit back and they're just spectators, and those people that are not really moving to fulfill God's calling on their life, Satan will not waste too much time and energy on you because you're not even worth his time and energy. But when you start to rise up, when he sees someone say, I'm going to do God's will. It's written about me in the scroll. I'm here to do your will, O God. Here I am to obey your word. When Christians start to rise up and start to move into obedience, Satan and his demonic powers start fearing. So what Satan did with Simon Peter was this. He was watching Simon Peter for years and slowly building a legal case against him. He's watching Simon Peter's weaknesses. He's looking at the sins that Simon Peter commits, even the secret sins. He's watching in the secret place. No one else can see, but Satan and his demons are looking, and they're writing down the accusations so they can bring, because that's the other book we talked about, the book of accusations or the book of transgressions. Even the thoughts that we think that are ungodly, the words that we speak out. Satan was watching Simon Peter's attitudes. He was watching the way that he reacts under pressure. He was watching the things that would come out of Simon Peter's mouth, and he's understanding his agendas. It was only a couple of chapters ago. Jesus asked his disciples, this is Matthew chapter 16, and Jesus asked his disciples, who do the people say I am? And some say, you're a prophet, and some say a great teacher, and some say Elijah. And then Jesus says, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter, under the revelation of God the Father, says, you are the Messiah, you are the Son of God. Jesus is rejoicing over Simon Peter, and Jesus says, Simon Peter, man has not revealed this to you. God the Father revealed this to you. This is so great that you've received this revelation. Upon this revelation of who Christ is, a church that overcomes the gates of hell will be built. Upon the revelation of who Christ is, Simon Peter, you've been blessed because you've got revelation from the Father, not from men. In the same conversation, then Jesus says, because of this revelation, you now receive the keys of kingdom authority. Now that you know fully who Christ is and you're walking in agreement with the revelation of who Jesus is, in his character, in his power, in his personality, in his plan, then you know what? Now you've got the keys of the kingdom. And what you bind in the earth is bound in the heavens. What you loose in the earth is loosed in the heavens. You'll have authority through this, Peter. And then Jesus starts talking about the cross and suffering that he's going to have to face. And Simon Peter understands power and glory and blessing and prosperity. He loves that stuff. Ruling, and he loves that. He hates the cross. So Peter comes and gets Jesus and takes Jesus aside. It says, he rebukes Jesus, How unwise. This will never happen to you, Jesus. You will not have to suffer. You will not have to go to the cross. And so Jesus rebukes Simon Peter. What does he say? Get behind me, Satan. Because actually, he starts with revelation from the Father. Now he's got revelation from Satan. And he's actually literally speaking on behalf of Satan. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, for your mind is not on the things of God. Your mind is on the things of men. You're thinking like a man. And you're a stumbling block to me in my mission. So Satan understands there's some things in Peter's life. He wants to rule. There's this expectation of the Messiah coming, raising up an army with the weapons of this world, conquering the Romans, and then being the world power. And that they could sit next to Jesus in this world power and rule the earth and have all the glory of this world and the finances and the authority of this world. There was something in the heart of a number of the disciples. Peter was one of them. That's why I'm saying you don't have to go to the cross. That's exactly what Satan was trying to say to Jesus in the 40 days of temptation. Shows him the power and the glory of the kingdoms of this world. He says, this all belongs to me. So Jesus, I can give it to whoever I want. Bow down and worship me. And I'll give it to you. That's exactly what Satan was saying through Simon Peter. Just saying this, that Satan had been studying in great detail Simon Peter. He had been writing down a list of the transgressions and the weaknesses. And he knew that if he could put Simon Peter under the right testing conditions, that Simon Peter, and for that to happen, he had to come out of God's protection, because God was protecting Simon Peter too much. God was watching over him and covering him too much. And Satan's going, let me take him out of your hand for just a bit, and I'll prove to you who he really is. Satan and his demonic powers have been watching you. And they've been writing in their book a list of things about me, about you. They're watching us about our attitudes. They know what we do in the secret place when no one looks. They even know, the things that we meditate upon when we shouldn't, and the things our eyes gaze upon, and the words that come out of our mouth when we're home with family. And they're all being listed. Because Satan is building a case against you. Because he knows that if he can win in court, he can stop your destiny being fulfilled. He's got a destiny for your life, by the way. There's a book of Satan's destiny for your life. You do not want to fulfill that book. Because the end will be death. The end will be hopelessness. It'll be despair. And he'll offer you everything this world has to offer. He'll offer you treasure. He'll offer you power. Just like the temptation on the mountain. Satan will tempt you, and you might be successful and rich and powerful in this life and in this world, but not because God did it. But the end of that road will be death for you. It'll be a spiritual death. Death for true joy. Death for true peace. Death for true hope. He'll offer you the treasures of it and the power and the glory of this world in his temptation. And he knows each one of us what sort of things really tempt us. Because if he put a platter of seafood in front of me, he's got no hope. I hate seafood. Okay? KFC, I'd really have to seek God's grace. But I'm just saying, there's certain things that will really tempt you, but the enemy knows. He's been studying you. I want to have a little bit more of a look at this thing of being taken into the law courts of heaven like that. Let's look at Job chapter 1. We're going to start with verse 6. One day, the angels, they came and they presented themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came with them. So the angels all now enter into the throne room or the law courts of heaven. And all of these angels, the Hebrew calls them the sons of God, they come and they stand around the throne, and Satan now comes into the law courts, comes into the throne room of God. The Lord then says to Satan, "Where have you come from?" So Satan answered the Lord, "I've been roaming throughout the earth, been going back and forth. Just going throughout the earth, back and forth, minding everybody else's business." If you understand English, you would have laughed. Minding everybody else's business. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless, he is upright, he's a man who fears God and he shuns evil." I don't know about you, but if I could get upset with God, if I was allowed to, I probably would. When Satan comes into the law courts of heaven, "Have you noticed my servant Glen?" I'm like, "Shh, Father, shh. Do not draw his attention to me whatsoever." But God initiates this. "Have you noticed my servant?" Put your name there. "Have you noticed my servant? No one on earth like them. They're blameless, they're upright, they fear God, they shun evil, they desire to do that which is right. Have you noticed them?" Does Job really fear God for nothing? Satan replied, "Haven't you put a hedge of protection around about him and his household and everything that he has?" It's like, I can't even touch Job. I can't touch his family. I can't touch his marriage because you've got this hedge of protection there. You guard and protect and you watch over Job. You guard and protect and you watch over his finances and his flocks. Your blessing of protection's there. Of course he's going to honour you. Of course he's going to say he loves you. Everything goes right for Job. You bless the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds spread out throughout the land. But if you stretch out your hand and you strike everything he has, he will surely curse you to your face. So the Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. It goes on, and one day Job's sons and daughters were killed, his flocks were destroyed, his finances bankrupted. Everything he had was destroyed, except for him and his wife. And it goes on. What happened is God set some boundaries. God said, "Okay, I'll let you test Job." This is how the law courts are working. "I will let you test Job because I'm going to lift my hands of protection off his family, off his finances. I'm going to lift my hand of protection off his marriage, in the sense later his wife is getting so bitter, his wife is saying, "Job, curse God and die." Now this is part of the thing. Satan says, if you lift your hands of protection off everything Job has, he will curse you. So what is happening is Satan goes to Job's wife and says to Job, "Curse God and die." Just being aware of what comes out of people's mouths over us. Just as Peter was used to speak from Satan to Jesus. So God sets certain boundaries, says you can test him this much but no more. And then later what happens is this. Job doesn't curse God, so Satan goes back into the law courts of heaven and asks for even more authority to touch Job's very body. And Job is struck down with disease and sores. And he's like this diseased beggar that has nothing left. Everything he has is lost. And his wife is standing there cursing him and saying, "You need to curse God." The one that should stand with him to support him is now cursing him and everything. It's just a picture that something similar now happens in Peter's life. Let's go back. There you go. If we follow Peter's story, we know that there's Gethsemane. And the first thing that happens in Gethsemane is Jesus takes Peter and James and John. All of the disciples go to Gethsemane. He says to all of them, watch and pray. But he takes Peter, James and John even deeper into the garden. And Gethsemane means the crushing place. That's where they crush the olives. And so Jesus, before the cross, takes all of his disciples in a place where all of them are getting tested. In fact, Jesus said, they're going into the season, strike the shepherd, scatter the sheep. He says there's a great testing coming on you. Satan wants to steal your joy. And the shepherd's going to be struck. There's going to be something that happens where the things that you rely on in this life will be taken from you. And they go into this crushing place. The testing has already begun. The demonic powers are already hanging over the Jesus company. And the Jesus company is already, because it says that Jesus says to them, stay here and watch and pray with me. And it says that they were deeply sorrowful and they went to sleep. They were stressed out and they were worried and they're tired from all that was happening because of the pressure on them spiritually and emotionally, and they just start sleeping. Jesus goes off in travail. He doesn't sleep. He watches, he prays, he intercedes. He comes back, he finds them asleep, he wakes them up. Peter is sleeping and slumbering when he should be praying and watching. Sometimes we worry when we should be praying and watching. And so Jesus comes back and he says this, wake up. Can't you pray with me just 1 hour? You need to watch and pray so when the temptation comes, you will overcome. You need to watch and pray so that when temptation comes, when Satan takes you to court, you will not fail. It's interesting, Jesus had given Peter already a warning that he's going to be